Just a couple notes about the background. When I was a young kid and growing up in a Navy family, I loved to collect Revell models, and maybe a few of you did the same when you were youngsters. And I had a nice battleship collection, and never realizing at the age of 10, as I was completing all of these various models of Navy ships, that someday I would become a naval officer, which was one of my goals, and then ultimately serve on a battleship. But I had to wait until I retired. I did 32 years in the Navy. I served on various ships, a couple of tours in Vietnam, and although I did see the Battleship New Jersey in the theater over there in Vietnam, I never got a chance to operate with any on active duty. So I had to wait until I retired back in '95, and then joined this marvelous museum ship here in 2012. Okay, the Battleship Iowa is located down here in San Pedro, and we've been here since May of 2012. And she's gracing our waterfront, and as Stephen said, here's the cruise ship that he was on, probably right there, the Princess. They operate right behind the Iowa.
There's Steve.
All right. And we are known as the Battleship of Presidents. The Iowa has had more presidents of the United States on board than any other Navy ship ever. We had Roosevelt came aboard in November '43. President Bush Sr. came aboard twice in the '80s, and President Reagan came aboard with Nancy back in the middle '80s as well. We are nicknamed the Big Stick, and of course all of you know from your history, Theodore Roosevelt, his foreign policy back in 1908 was speak softly and carry a big stick. So the sailors back in the '80s nicknamed the ship the Big Stick because of her massive firepower. They're the largest class of battleships ever designed. They were the result of Navy intelligence coming out in the late 1930s. The Japanese were developing a much larger class of battleship, getting ready to start a big war out in the Pacific, which, as you all know, they did. And as a result, the Iowa class was designed. This is the lead ship of the class. 4 were built, Missouri, New Jersey, and Wisconsin. 2 more were started and never finished. So the Iowa is the lead ship, and she saw service in 3 wars. In terms of firepower, she's got immense guns, and she's got lots of armor and well-trained crew and so forth, and we'll go over some of that. But she was designed to duke it out against the enemy and win. That's the key part. When you go into a sea battle against the bad guys, you want to be sure that you prevail. And this class of battleship did that greatly. So here's a little background here. You're not going to remember all the dates, but it puts things in perspective. Designed in the late 1930s, constructed the first 2 years of the 40s, launched in '42, commissioned in February of '43, and we just celebrated her 75th birthday last Saturday. So we had a big event there, and the ship's commissioning bell, 900-pound bell, was returned to the ship from the state of Iowa last Saturday, and I was there for all of that. She saw service out in World War II, decommissioned in '49. Fleet Admiral Nimitz recommissioned her in '51. She went out to the Korea zone, operated until 1958, and then she went into mothballs and preservation status for 26 years until Reagan came along, and he wanted, of course, to build a 600-ship Navy, which many of you know about, and he brought back all 4 battleships into service. And when the Cold War ended and we prevailed in '89, all the battleships lost their funding and they went out of service in '90 to '92, as shown here. So she went back into mothballs of preservation again, East Coast, West Coast, and finally the ship became available for adoption. And so we submitted our bid, we beat out Vallejo and Stockton, and we got the ship in 2011. We refurbished it up north in 2012 and towed her down the coast. So we got her in May of 2012, open for business in July.
When you say we got her, who are you?
Okay, good question. The we is the Pacific Battleship Center. That is a nonprofit organization that owns and operates the ship. The ship technically is ours, but the Navy has recall rights for 2 more years. If they want, they can yank it away from us with a presidential decree, and it goes back to the Navy, but we've already been told by the Navy unequivocally they don't want it back. So we get to keep her. All right, here she is being launched in New York Navy Yard in '42. And let's take a look at her armament. She is a floating fortress. She displaces about 45,000 tons, half of which is armor. So she can be receiving a lot of damage from the bad guys and still keep on fighting. 9 16-inch guns. She's got 10 twin mounts of 5-inch guns. That's the width of the shell. She, during World War II, was completely covered with 40 millimeter and 20 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. And what you need to know is that was her primary purpose as it evolved, not as designed. The ship was designed to duke it out in surface engagements, but she wound up shooting down a lot of Japanese aircraft in World War II. All those anti-aircraft guns have been removed because they're not effective against jet aircraft. Okay, so some of the contributions that she made during World War II is that she transported Roosevelt across the Atlantic to meet with Stalin and Churchill over in the Tehran Conference. And what was unique about that is that was where the decision was made for the invasion of Europe with the subsequent D-Day landings in June of '44. That decision was made in Tehran, but the planning for it occurred on the Iowa as she came back across the Atlantic. Her job, as she actually wound up doing in World War II, was guarding the fast fleet aircraft carriers. As they're landing and launching aircraft, she provided a protective screen to shoot down the bad guys as they were coming in. Shot down 5 aircraft, got some probables and some assists. She also got involved in one surface engagement. She sunk a Japanese cruiser. She bombarded a lot of islands in the Pacific and was present at the surrender in Tokyo Bay on the 2nd of September, and the Iowa was parked right behind the Missouri where the surrender took place. She was a floating gas tank. She carries, folks, 2.4 million gallons of fuel on board. So she can unrep or underway replenish all the other destroyers and ships in the screen, and then once every 10 days or so, an oiler would come along and top her off. She served as a flagship for various admirals, including Bull Halsey. Many of you have heard of Admiral Halsey of World War II fame. He had his flag on the Iowa along with some others. And she also brought back former prisoners of war and other servicemen when the war ended. Okay, so this is what she looks like. She's cruising out into the war zone in early 1944. And her anti-aircraft guns, I mentioned, were the 5-inchers as well. They could shoot up 7 miles, 10 miles out, and so forth. But she was covered with 40 millimeter anti-aircraft guns, and they're all gone. But we're trying right now to get back on board the Iowa, the last remaining 40 millimeter that we've located on the East Coast. So we're working on that. And here she is shelling the island of Japan in July and August of '45 before the war ended. As I mentioned, she was parked right behind the Missouri. In fact, this photo was taken from the Missouri, looking at some of the captain's gigs parked here in the water, and then, of course, the Iowa in the distance. Okay, during the Korea campaign, when she was brought back into service, recommissioned by Fleet Admiral Nimitz, she participated with the other battleships in bombarding the coast of North Korea, firing over 4,600 16-inch shells. And she had numerous gun strikes, and she also rescued some downed pilots. She helped save a destroyer that was being bracketed, and she steamed over 40,000 miles. So she saw quite a bit of service during the Korean conflict. And she picked up 2 battle stars.
What do you mean by bracketed?
Bracketed, okay. If your destroyer is here and the enemy is firing shells, the ones that are short, the ones that are long, that's bracketing your target. And the next one will come in and hit you. So when the destroyer Thompson was getting bracketed by a North Korean shore battery, the Iowa came and silenced the battery before the destroyer got hit. And here she is firing off the coast of North Korea. Now, during the Cold War era in the Reagan administration, she did a lot of humanitarian operations going out mostly to Central and South America. In her first year of competition against other Navy ships on the East Coast, she won the coveted Battenberg Cup, which is highly desirable because you only have one winner in all the ships that competed. She was only 1 year old at the time and won it. I mentioned that Reagan came aboard with Nancy for the 100th anniversary of the donation of the Statue of Liberty to the people of the United States, occurring in New York Harbor back in '86. During the rest of the '80s, she provided escort operations with her sister ship, the USS Wisconsin, out in the Persian Gulf. Because as many of you will remember, Iran was rattling their sabers and mining the narrow straits of Hormuz, and in order to get those Allied oil tankers out of Kuwait City and out of Saudi Arabia, through the Straits of Hormuz, out into the Persian Gulf to get to free markets, they had to run the gauntlet. And so the Wisconsin and the Iowa provided escort operations to those vessels. We had 4 or 5 ships that were mined. One of them was a ship that I had been on earlier, and including 1 tanker. Some of you may recall that. So nevertheless, that was still effective, and eventually Iran subsided their hostilities. In 1989, we had a horrible explosion that occurred aboard the ship. Many of you may recall this during the gunnery exercise off the coast of San Juan, Puerto Rico. Turret number 2 blew up. Everybody inside was killed going down 4 decks. The only people survived were in the magazine where all the gunpowder was. But that is a separately armored area, and therefore they were saved. But that was a very horrible incident, and if you want to know more about it, you can go online and type in Iowa explosion on Google, and you can read about it on PC. She also fired the longest shell ever from a 16-inch gun, almost over 25 miles. Normal range is around 23, 24. And lastly, she got decommissioned in 1990. Here she is firing a broadside. A broadside means all 9 16-inch guns are all being fired together. And some of you are going to say, does the ship scoot sideways when the guns all go off? Everybody seems to think that when they come on board the ship. The answer is no. It doesn't move 1 inch. Now you're going to say, well, how about that disturbed water off the bow? No, that's just part of the concussion blast and so forth. The ship is drawing 37 feet of water below the water line. She also has recoil of the 16-inch guns of 4 feet. So when those guns fire, they go back into the turret 4 feet and come back out. So the ship's absorbing all of that gunfire, and therefore does not move at all when she fires a broadside. But we like to explain that to the guests because they all seem to think the ship scoots, and it doesn't. Now, so here she is being towed through the Panama Canal. She was designed to go through the Panama Canal, making her a 2-ocean battleship with 1 foot on either side. So it's a tight squeeze, folks. The canal is 110 feet wide. The Iowa class are 108. Wow. And a friend of mine took this photo when the ship was coming out of the refurbishment in Richmond in May of 2012 and getting ready to come down the coast, being towed to get to San Pedro. That also was the same weekend of the 75th anniversary of the building of the Golden Gate Bridge. Many of you may remember that. So here she is passing, well, it doesn't quite show it, but she's about to go into the Golden Gate Bridge. All took place at the same time. So that was a big event. So we opened up the ship on the 7th of July to the public, and thousands of people came down. I was one of the original people in the tour guide group, and I was on the pier at the time. And let's go take a little brief tour. So hop on the 110, which is just out here, and head for San Pedro and follow the signs. And here's what she looked like a few years ago with all her bunting all around her, but we have the world's biggest parking lot right there. As Stephen will tell you, we can hold about 1,500 cars. And so come on down and park for a couple of bucks an hour. We'll greet you here at the quarterdeck and tell you a few safety features and a couple of pointers before you go off on your self-guided tour. Or if you contact me, I'll give you a personal tour. And here's her big, massive firepower, her big 16-inch guns, Turret 1, Turret 2. And as one of the gentlemen here asked me to remind you, Turret 2 is pointed at Catalina. Turret 3 is pointed at the mayor's office downtown.
Too bad it won't reach the governor's office.
5-inch gun mounts, this is what these look like. We still fire these today for fun. And if you've got a big checkbook and want to come down and give us a check, we'll be happy to man one of the 5-inch gun mounts and make them go boom. They make a horrible amount of noise. You got to wear ear protection, but it entertains our guests and they get a big kick out of it, literally. The wardroom is on the tour, and this is where the officers all ate their meals, as I would have in the Navy. We have a voyage map where we show all the voyages of the ship and the lounge. The Turret 2 Explosion Memorial is on the side of the turret number 2. The 47 sailors that were all killed are shown there. We have a memorial service every April to commemorate and honor the 47. This is the CO's bed in his import quarters. However, it was occupied by the President of the United States, Roosevelt. And we had a bathtub put in for Roosevelt because, as you all know, he had polio and he could not walk. He could only stand, but most of the time he was in a wheelchair. So the Navy installed a bathtub for him. Only Navy ship ever to have a bathtub installed by the President, and it's still there today. This is what the bridge area looks like. We recon the ship. It's all heavily armored to protect the captain and his watchstanders, surrounded by 17.5 inches of armor. And it's right there. And this is a view from one of the other conning stations higher up on the ship to look at the beautiful bow and the 2 turrets right there in San Pedro. We have defensive measures on the ship to protect us from incoming cruise missiles and low-flying aircraft. These are called chaff and flare dispensers. And we also have a gun over here on the right. We have 4 of those called CWIS, close-in weapon system. It fires out 20-millimeter depleted uranium bullets at a high rate of speed. It's all automated, and there's no sailors operating that gun. We have numerous missiles on board. These are all strategic missiles with nuclear capabilities that were installed in the 1980s. The top ones are the Harpoons. These are the ones that shoot at other Navy ships. And on the bottom are the armored box launchers, which hold the Tomahawks. And the Tomahawks have a 1,500-mile range and are nuclear capable. So we were a strategic war asset during the 80s. Enlisted berthing, we could hold 2,800 sailors on this ship during World War II. Korea, we have down to 1,800, and the Cold War down to 1,500. Every sailor got a bunk. They didn't have to hot bunk or hot rack, and this is what they look like today. We have an overnight program. If any of you have scouts or know of any, we have an overnight program for Cub and Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Y organizations, and so forth, and we're happy to have them on board for overnight and so forth. Anybody interested, talk to me afterwards. The galley, we had 2 galleys on, well, one main galley, but 2 big mess decks and chow lines. And one of the mess decks is still in operation. The other one's converted into a museum. We have the National Battleship Museum. We nailed it, folks. Just a year ago, we got smart. We have 7 other battleships throughout the U.S., and nobody grabbed this name. So we copyrighted or trademarked it, and so we are the National Battleship Museum. Come on in and take a look at our very upscale and first-rate museum. These are more of the exhibits, the history of gunpowder and explosions at sea, a very fascinating topic, because every now and then we do get accidents on cruisers and battleships, and they've occurred over the years. We have a to die for ship store. It's better than the one on the Midway in San Diego. And we sell everything, anything and everything. Come on down. Now, the highlight of our most recent edition, which Stephen may have noticed, is we have a helicopter on board. Just came aboard last May, and it was refurbished by our volunteers. This helicopter served on the Iowa in the 1950s in the Korean conflict. And it disappeared and went off to the French government for 40 years, went all over Europe, came back to Philadelphia, went into the boneyard, we found out about it, bought it, refurbished it, and it's now on the ship. We're the only battleship in the country, and there's 8 of them, with a helicopter on board. So we are very proud of that. So come on down and take a look. Here's some logistics. These are our typical fares for getting on board, but I want everybody to look at their table. How many of you got one of these little tiny cards on your table? The little one. Grab it. Right now. Grab it. Grab it. Fight for it. That is half price. And these are out of print, out of circulation. I'm the only one who still has them. So if you got one, great. If you didn't, come and see me. I got more. But for those of you that didn't get one, you'll have to settle for $4 off. That's this one. So these little guys here, half price, which is basically you buy one, second person gets aboard for free. So these are some typical fares. How many veterans we got in the room? Show of hands. Thank you for your service. You folks get to, yeah. And I know we got some seniors in the room, so you can see the well, I just look around.
The lights are shining brightly.
Not many. So if you're retired, active duty, military, or a reservist, or so forth, and how many people here Probably, anybody from Iowa? No kidding. If you were from Iowa, you'd get a board for free. Anyway, so, one of our photo ops, and I had to show this to you, is an opportunity to have your photo professionally taken, and then you get to cover your ears and open your mouth as the guns go off. This is what it looks like. People buy this photo right and left.
Yeah, I did. I bought it.
You would,
I did. I bought two.
So here's the inside scoop. I won't read all of it to you, but take a note, go down the thing, it tells you what to bring, what not to bring, how to behave yourself. These are the kind of tips that we as tour guides like to encourage our guests to follow, and you'll have a marvelous time on the ship. How'd I do? I think we're about done. Well, we're getting there. Volunteer opportunities. We need volunteers badly. We not only have tour guides, but you can see operations and maintenance, security, admin, IT. We have openings in all of these departments for people who want to come down. And we have people coming all the way out from the East Coast once every 6 months. People come down from Washington, Northern Cal, and of course in the greater LA area constantly. But we don't have enough. The ship desperately needs more volunteers, so you can go to that website or contact me. We'd be happy to have you come aboard. So here's what you can do. Bring your family. Download the app. App's on both the smartphones, both Android and the iPhone. Buy a membership if you want, and go to this website to get more information. And I think I'm done.
Question?
Yes, sir.
On the 40mm guns, there
Yes.
were a lot, in the picture, there were a lot of spent shells there.
Yes.
So I'm assuming the rate of fire there is pretty strong.
About 450 rounds a
How
minute.
many?
450 rounds a minute with the
Wow.
4 barrels going.
Okay, so what happened to all those spent shells? You just
During the
reload
war,
those
they all
yourself?
went over the side.
Really?
Yep. We saved no brass during the war. Today, any brass fired from our 5-inch guns on our Navy ships are all carefully saved and recycled. Good question. Some more, yes, sir.
Why was the ship towed from San Francisco? Why
Because-
couldn't it go under its own power?
Because she was out of service. She'd been out of service since 1990. We had no crew. So to bring a crew back aboard would take a year of training and cost millions and millions of dollars to make the ship capable of going under her own power.
Got it.
So she was towed down 4 days with a single tugboat. Yes, sir.
One of the slides said it shot down 5 aircraft. Is that all the aircraft it shot down, or did it shoot down more?
We
than
shot
that?
down 5 aircraft, 3 assists, and 3 probables. We were involved in 18 anti-aircraft engagements, but that did not all lead to the downing of an aircraft, because we had other ships around us that shot them down. But we assisted. Yes, sir. Some more questions? Yes, in the back.
How do you know who's shooting down an aircraft in the fog of war? Like, you got people firing all over the place, don't you?
You got a lot. How do you know if that guy that is being shot down, you get the credit for? You got a lot of observers watching, and you got an excited gun crew watching the plane go down. So it's probably not too difficult to figure out who gets credit. And also, every 5th round that is fired is generally a tracer round. So tracer rounds light up the sky, both so you can watch your shells coming out of your guns, and every 5th one is colorful, and it's going right into the bad guy. So you can pretty well tell where they're coming from, and therefore we get credit. Yeah, good question.
How do
Yes,
you
sir.
earn a battle flag? You said that there was one slide that said it was like 2, you earn another battle flag?
Battle Star.
A battle star?
Oh, the stars?
Yeah.
Those battle stars are what you call campaign ribbons or campaign stars. The Navy designates any particular camp. Let's say the Marianas was a campaign. The Philippine Sea Turkey Shoot, that was another campaign. If your ship participated, you get a battle star. So I think the Iowa got 9 for World War II.
That was for the ship.
Yes, sir.
What
Ship
was
gets
the
the
main
star to
use
bring
of
it
the
down.
battleship in
I'm sorry?
Korea? And were they mostly bombarding Chinese or Koreans?
No, it's all North Korean targets.
Okay.
No, we were not bombarding from the ships anything in China.
Rich,
Yes, sir.
there's a book called Requiem for Battleship Yamato.
Oh, yes, the Yamato.
You know that book?
I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with it.
What's unique about it is a Japanese gentleman was going to law school in Japan when the war broke out, and he wrote very well, he had good skills. He was stationed on the Battleship Yamato on the bridge during the battle where the Yamato was sunk.
Oh,
After the war was over, he wrote a book, Requiem for Battleship Yamato.
okay.
MacArthur wouldn't let it be published in Japan for 10 years. Then it was out. It's now published by the Navy Blue Jackets Manual, I think. It's used at Naval Surface Warfare Officer Training School,
Okay.
and it doesn't glorify war. It shows the horror of war, and he tells very graphically what it was like to be on the bridge with the bullets whizzing by, the carnage involved. It's really an impressive book to read. Very unique if you've never read it like that.
For the rest of you, the Yamato was the largest and most deadly battleship ever built by anybody. Japan built two of them, the Musashi and the Yamato, with 18-inch guns. That's the width of the shell. They were larger than our 16s, and the ship was heavily armored. However, the Japanese were reluctant to bring it into full-up engagements against the U.S. because it was such a strategic prized asset. So we just sank it by air power. And that's, by the way, how we lost all our battleships in World War II, was by air power only in Pearl Harbor. The United States lost no battleships in surface engagements in World War II, none, because of superior design and all the armor. But air power is what did end battleships, and then your next question is, why don't we have any more battleships in service? And the reason is because one, they're steam driven, all our other ships today are nuclear or gas driven, and secondly, it's because they're obsolete. You can extend the range by aircraft and missiles much further than what the Iowa can do. And they're manpower intensive, and they cost a fortune to operate.
Well, thank you, Rich.
Very much.
Before you go, because everything tastes better with history, and we all know how much I love history. I work for a historic theater. I wanted to give you one of our Rotary pins.
Thank you very much.
And this is also a thank you from our club. It represents good as the new cool. The things we do here have ramifications across the globe. So you were here today. Thank you for being here today. And this was made by a woman trying to take her family out of poverty. So you have ramifications across the globe. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.